Hello. I want to welcome everyone to three areas of economic development every community struggles with and how to solve them. It's an exciting webinar. I'm really excited about the thought leaders we've assembled today. We have quite a large group registered for the webinar, so we're going to give just a couple more minutes to let everybody sign in and make sure they have everything working. As we do that, we'll be introducing everybody to each of the topics and the presenters. A couple of housekeeping things that I just want to get out there as we get ready to do the presentation. You will be receiving a follow-up email with the recorded link, and you'll be able to share that. And then there'll be a couple of other resources that may come up throughout the presentation that each of the presenters, whether that's myself, Ron from Golden Shovel, or Meg Manke from the Rose Group, or Ben Eubanks, we'll share those, and we'll certainly be open to have a great discussion today and have those resources available to you. So with that, I know we have a lot to cover, so I think we're going to go ahead and start it off and introduce everyone. So first of all, I'll introduce myself. Ron Krisha. I'm with Golden Shovel Agency, and we handle workforce attraction, marketing communications, economic development, communications, work with communities in trying to help them with their business expansion and their workforce needs. With that comes a lot of change, which is why it's exciting to bring in Meg. And so Meg, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yes, hi, thanks, Ron. Good morning. My name is Meg Manke. I'm the COO and head of training for Rose Group International. And what we really focus on in Rose Group is consulting organizations, for-profit and not-for-profit, on how to really mobilize teams all kind of in the same direction and work through change and make sure that change is not miserable and awful and hard and awful again. But that it actually is fun and an opportunity for innovation. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that today. Thanks for having me.
And then our Lighthouse Research and Advisory, Ben Eubanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. Hey, everybody. Ben Eubanks here. Glad to be here. If it pokes through at some point in the conversation, I'm from the southeastern U.S., located in Huntsville, Alabama, and that might come across and how I draw some words out, but don't hold that against me. I run Lighthouse Research. We do research on how employers can find, attract, and keep their talent. So it's a lot of fun. My background's in recruiting and HR, and so I get to bring that practical experience into the research side, and we work with a lot of employers on understanding the trends, the best practices, what the high-performing companies are doing that the rest of us can learn from. And so when I'm not speaking and writing and doing all that fun stuff, I'm a dad of 4, and they keep me plenty busy at home.
Very good. Well, thank you, Meg. Thank you, Ben. Let's go ahead and get started into it. We have a lot of information to cover and want to make sure we pull this together. So 3 struggles you're going to hear about today is understanding the ordeals suburban and rural communities experience. I deem that the edge effect. I want to talk about that. And then you're going to hear about managing transformations and effectively communicating the changes to board members, elected officials, business leaders, and community members. And then exploring the best practices to bring in people. So the edge effect, if you've heard the term, comes from the early 19th century. There's a gentleman by the name of Frederick Edward Clemens out of Nebraska who actually introduced the world to vegetation quadrants. The idea that different types of ecosystems or ecotones come together, and where those ecosystems come together, that is the period of transition where the most change and diversity happens. His studies also argued that vegetation does not stay in a permanent stage, but gradually changes. A clarifying image of that would be, for example, the land ecosystem transitioning to an aquatic ecosystem. And if you've been around lakes, streams, and so forth, it's very obvious that in those transitional ecosystems is where we see the most things happening, the most diversity. Both sides are coming together, and it really is the place where you're going to find the most change as well as the most opportunity. So wait a minute, what does this have to do with economic development, communities, and growth? Why would we be talking about vegetation? the edge effect in ecological sense, because the edge effect really translates to economic development as well. And when we start to look at economic development, community development, and the ecosystems there, this is a less charged, better way to understand the changes we face. So many times right now when communities talk about change, there can be really charged words like changing values, changing culture, immigration. But the reality is communities cannot stay in a permanent stage. And we know that they are gradually changing, very much like the vegetation and the ecosystem. So it translates well over here. And what I have found is by talking about the edge effect, it allows people to understand that change is needed and happening. And then we can talk about how we can best go after the edges and go after growing in that community. So for example, one edge effect, the edge effect of millennials and baby boomers. In 2016, we're all very familiar that the millennial workforce surpassed the baby boomers in numbers in the workforce. Well, the edge effect is the change in community diversity between adjacent economic and community ecosystems. Think of it this way. You have these two groups of people that both have very dynamic sets of skills, but very different. And the edge of where they're coming together is an opportunity for sharing, is an opportunity for growth. But too often, I hear communities or I hear community members wanting to pull those apart and remove the edge, and they want to go to what we call the core. We argue with the edge effect that community leaders need to be moving to the edge, and they need to be looking for those opportunities, not away from the edge. We know this is happening in the June reports of LinkedIn, and if you look at the migration reports, you can see that there are up to 15 hotbeds of migration where workers are moving in and out, and then along those corridors. So what we have is we have ecosystems of workers moving around the country, and they are intersecting with communities or creating edges. So again, we ask communities to look for your edges, look for the groups of people, look for who's moving and how they're moving around the country, and then look for the opportunities where you can identify that diversity and that opportunity. Here is just a simplistic, multifaceted Venn diagram, but these are many of the different edges that you would see. You have urban and rural communities that are going to bump up against each other. The opportunity zones, we have worker migration happening, community values, workforce shortages, environmental concerns, and diverse workforce. This is just one example, but in all of these intersection points, I would argue, and the edge effect would argue, there's more diversity and more opportunity, and we should learn from that, and we should go to those points. So go find the places where urban and rural values are coming together and learn about how we can share those and build better communities and build better futures. Communities need to explore the edges. The bottom line is that people want to live and move to here or your community for what you are today and what you will be tomorrow, not what you have been. Too often I see communities that want to talk about what happened and the wonderful festivals that they had 5 years ago and how those were great. And they were wonderful at one time. And they still can maybe have value and culture and community for that. But the new communities that are moving in, the new amount of workers that are coming to your edges, they also want to bring their community. They also want to bring their values. And they want to share that, and they want to grow, and they want to form new communities within existing communities. And so it's important that community leaders can communicate to elected officials, board members, and so forth, that the change is coming, and to explore that change and to capitalize on it is really what's going to bring community growth. Core versus edge strategies. And this is a term that we use when we're talking about how a community can promote itself. And I ask the communities when they do their marketing strategies or they put together a plan that they know, are you promoting an edge strategy? Are you looking for opportunity and diversity? Or are you promoting a core strategy which retracts, which pulls you back to yourself? And certainly the media is very good about core strategies, especially for rural America. They love to write about how rural America is maybe not flourishing, is we have communities that are dying, or we have community. It's almost like this is the media's way of really driving clicks and comments and for their ads. But the reality is rural America is not dying. In fact, the latest studies are showing that people are moving into older generation communities. They're moving out of the urban areas into the suburbs and into the rural, and there is a huge opportunity. So when you put a strategy together, you should ask yourself, how am I phrasing this campaign? Am I doing it for the core, for the people that already exist? Or am I promoting new vibrant businesses? Am I promoting new people, new success stories? Broadband, for example. The promotion of broadband brings in folks that can now live and work in your community from their homes or in a different way that has happened in the past. So promoting language like workforce, residents, skills, entrepreneurs, and talent versus immigration, millennials, refugees, those words bring up a core and they immediately bring up a reaction. But if you move to the positive side, like, hey, we need to bring in a workforce, we need to bring in new talent, we need to bring in new ideas, that becomes less threatening. A couple other edge strategies to consider, and we really explore these when we do our strategies with communities, but making sure everything's mobile responsive. Can you do everything from your phone? Is it video intense? Because that really resonates with people living on the edges. LinkedIn, social media, building out community ambassadors. Find the people in your community that really accentuate what the edge may look like. So find those people already existing in your community that know people that are residing on the edge and tell their stories and attract. Diversity brings new groups. It's a community. Edge strategies bring new groups to your community, which is a positive. That's not a negative. It brings a stronger economy. These people are coming in. They're all different groups of people. They're buying homes. They're going to schools. They're paying taxes. They're doing all the things that an economic system needs. They're more than just warm bodies. It's employee recruitment. It's talent. It's ideas. It's entrepreneurs. And yes, there's new values and culture. And that should be embraced, and that should be used and talked about. Why edges are a winning strategy? Because right now, 15 regions in the United States create most of the ecosystems for attracting founders and employees and entrepreneurs, the Silicon Valleys and the New York. So there's already a network out there that supports many of these fertile grounds. The reality is, for regions outside those hotbeds, they have to overcome that geographic barrier. So we have to work a little bit harder to get to those edges, and we have to be a little bit more cognizant of how we're going to bring those people from the edges. Because remember, if you're an urban community, you're going to want to practice a core strategy because you're going to want to keep your base. The rural and the other areas, the rural and the suburban, they're going to want more edge strategies because you want to pull from those areas. It's all about migration. Distressed areas need to develop edge strategies to attract talent, and they need to really bring on a champion effect. And in order to do that, we offer a couple solutions. Put your competitive advantages together. Put your SMART goals together. List your targets and know why people should come and create an elevator pitch. One of the resources that we offer is a workforce attraction toolkit that helps you outline all this. So now that we've given some ideas of how to use the edge effect and how to understand change that's coming, now the important thing is, how do we communicate that? And so with that, Meg, I'm going to push this over to you and turn this over to you and say, how do we bridge that gap of managing the change that's in front of us?
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. I love that you tied together something about science and the environment that I really, even though I grew up on a ranch, I don't really know all that much about that stuff, to what's really actually happening for people. I think that's really intuitive and great, because folks in rural areas like myself, I'm in Spearfish, South Dakota, on the western side the state of South Dakota can identify with that, even if we don't understand the science behind all of it. So thanks, that was awesome. Ron, just for those of you who are attending, so you know this, Ron has control of the slides. So I'm going to try and remember what each of my slides says and instruct Ron accordingly. I'm not sure how well that's going to go, and it will not be his fault. So really what we want to talk about now is that visioning for the future and for the people, not only the people that are part of your core community, but also the people that are coming in from the edges, out of the city or out of different parts of the world, coming into your economy of your smaller communities, and really deciding how to provide a vision for them. Now, when we do work with our clients, we talk all the time about vision, because what you might have in your head as a executive director of a chamber, or maybe in charge of an economic development corporation, or even one of the major businesses in a small community, what you have in your head for your vision for that community might not necessarily be translated to other people. And I mean in a very literal sense. We don't very often talk about our big plans that we have, especially in small communities, because we're kind of a little bit nervous that people, will disagree, or they won't like them, or they'll say, gosh, we're not there yet, or we don't know how to get there, or we've already tried that. And so we really work with our clients to help them understand how to get people through change, how to understand them from their perspective, not so much trying to get them bought into what you're doing from your perspective, but really understanding where they're at and what hangups they might have about something, communicating transparently about what that looks like so you can create a shared vision together. Okay, go ahead, Ron. Let's see what happens next. So I'm a marathon runner, so I always give an example of marathon training is brutal. I mean, it's brutal. You have these long, ridiculous runs. I actually had an injury earlier this season. I thought I kind of wanted to just cut off one of my legs right above the knee because it hurt so bad. But I finally got through that. And then there's cross training, and you can never eat the chocolate cake. You always have to eat chicken. And I'm here to tell you, I've tried cooking chicken almost all of the ways. And it still seems like it's always either dry or doesn't really taste very good. So marathon training is brutal. So why do we do it? Why do I do this? Why do I do this crazy stuff? My boyfriend asks me that all the time. Well, it's because of the reward, right? It's the team environment, even though it's an individual race. All the people around you are supporting you, and you're proud of yourself, and it's crazy when you get to the end of a race to think, holy smokes, I can't believe all the miles I just put in, not today, but for the whole season to finish that race. And so just the feeling of being part of a really big thing and finishing something for yourself is incredible. So then that translates to business. Change is brutal, right? I mean, it seems really miserable. There's eye rolling and backbiting. You could see the chess pieces, the two people, and they're like, oh man, we don't even know where to go from here. And so when we think about all that and change feels really hard, we think, why in the heck are we doing this anyways? Well, again, it's the reward. It's the reward of knowing that you're inviting people into your community, that you've got new homeowners that are moving in and maybe starting new families, and that you've got new business and infrastructure coming in, and you can offer people a really amazing experience in your community. And then, of course, there's always the bit about being part of a really great team who made sure that all of that could happen, not only for the community, but for the team that you're on and the people who are being invited into your community. So, but then how do we do this, Meg? How do we get together as a team and really have team dynamics that make a lot of sense so that we understand each other and we can move on? We've worked with lots of executive boards and chamber groups, actually, and there can be loaded agendas for some people, but mostly everybody wants things to work in the same direction for the same goal. It's understanding other people's perspectives that kind of gets in the way of success sometimes. And so we use a system that we created within Rose Group called culture types. And there are 4 different culture types. There are fixers, independents, stabilizers, and organizers. I think that's on the next slide, Ron. There it is. So these 4 different culture types really measure how teams work together and the dynamics of teams and the way they interact with each other. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with either Myers-Briggs or DISC or Colors, the Insights Model, Predictive Index, and those are all incredible resources that we've had at our fingertips for the last several years in business. We created this system to be the next step, the next move in how do we really effectively evaluate where we're going as teams or departments within organizations and within communities. So fixers really prefer team and chaos. So they don't mind a little bit of chaos. Those are the people that grab the whiteboard marker and run into the conference room and they say, hey, we got this cool new idea. Let's go try this out. And they gather everyone up. And then we have independents who are also chaos tolerant. So they don't mind that fixer screaming around the office trying to get everybody gathered up, but they're self-driven. So chances are they might not come along with the fixer right away. They want some time to process that information by themselves first. Doesn't mean they're not a team player, just means they need a little bit more time to think about what's going on. And then we have stabilizers, and stabilizers are team-driven, but instead of being chaos tolerant, they're actually order tolerant. And those order tolerant folks really need more information. So you can, I'll invite you to remember a time when you've, been talking with a group of people and there's somebody who's constantly asking questions. Well, how does it impact these people? And what about this group? And what if we add on to the community over here? What's that going to make people, on the opposite side of the community feel like? And so they're constantly asking questions because that order tolerance makes them feel a little bit uneasy with change when they don't have enough information. And then on the other side, that we've got organizers, and they're order tolerant just like stabilizers. And so they're asking lots of questions as well, but they're self-driven like the independent. So again, they need a little bit of time to process information for themselves first. And it might take them a while to process that information because they've got lots of questions. And organizers are really interested in knowing about why we're doing this and how it's going to impact the budget. And is it actually worth doing what we're doing? Is it going to net us some gain as a community or an organization or not? And so these culture types are really set up to measure team dynamics in understanding the work preferences of different people on a team, and then also understanding the environment they like to work in. All right, Ron, what's next? So here's an example of what we do when we work with our clients. We actually have them take the culture type assessment, and then from there we get the results and we scatter plot them so we can understand and help them understand exactly where everyone is. So in this example, you can see Greg is really high independent, and Chad is about a middle of the road organizer. And so those two have very different perspectives in terms of how much information they need to process a change. Greg doesn't really need much at all. He's pretty chaos tolerant. Now Chad, he wants lots of information. And so they might kind of drive each other a little bit crazy in the sense that Chad always thinks Greg's running ahead and never paying attention to the important details. And Greg thinks Chad is a stick in the mud and constantly badgering everyone with questions. All right, what's next? So the thing that's important, or the best way to use all of this information about culture types, especially in the environment where Ron explained, where we've got kind of a culmination of the core group within small communities, and then this edge strategy that's coming in, and all these ecosystems combining with each other, that brings on a lot of change and a lot of different perspectives. And so how do we really understand change is the first thing to talk about. And then how does each culture type understand change? So this is the Kurtz change transition model. And historically, a change transition model, it has really just been an upside down bell curve, all flat and smooth. And it kind of is a bummer for a while, and you just hang in there and you kind of gut it out, and then it gets better. And that's what all change is like, right? No, not right. Of course not. It's got more spiky points like this one we've created. And so every change is the same, whether it's a big change or a small change. It's how we really manage it as culture types that makes a big difference in how quickly and efficiently we get through change together. So of course you're in a normal state, and then you have a change event. Let's say a new business comes into town or wants to come into town, and everybody's kind of talking about, is this good for our community? Is it not good for our community? And it seems like, of course it would be good for our community, but there's always a few opinions that say, well, is it really though? I mean, is this the kind of business we want to attract, and what kind of people will they bring with them? And can we support this big new initiative or new company coming into our small community? So the change event happens and everybody kind of goes into decline. So they're really thinking, it's probably not going to happen. I mean, it's interesting to think about, or it makes me really anxious, but it's probably not going to happen. So we'll just kind of ignore it and deny that. Until you get to a point of let go. And at let go, that's where the innovation phase starts. And in innovation phase, if we really try and squash change and then just keep limited information, we don't want to talk to anybody about too much stuff or give anybody too much information, then we squash innovation phase. And if we squash innovation phase, we really give up the opportunity as a community or an organization to explore all the opportunities that there really are involved with the change. And so you really want to let innovation phase live and breathe. And you can manage those energy swings in that innovation phase, which we'll talk about next. After innovation phase, you go into new normal. And as you can see on this slide, it shows you what it looks like for each one of the different culture types. So new normal, the ideal is that at the end, your energy is as high, if not higher, than it was when you started. Or it was when you were in quote unquote normal state before the change. Now, we can all remember a time or a person or ourselves at a point in our life where we didn't let go of what was, and we didn't really go through innovation phase. And then our new normal was actually lower energy. So that makes you move or quit a job or look for another job, or really just be miserable in a place that you are. And we don't want that to happen. And that actually happens way more than we want it to. And so if you understand these 4 different culture types, you have an opportunity to make sure that people, by and large, more on average or higher, go through change and feel good about it and come out at that new normal state a little higher. Now you'll notice that fixers and independents hardly even have any kind of a decline at all because they're chaos tolerant. And then when they go into innovation phase, they've got, oh man, this is going to be great. What about these 17 ideas? And then they go down to, oh my gosh, I don't know how we're ever going to get through that, because these folks are chaos tolerant. Organizers and stabilizers take a little bit longer to get through decline because they're gathering up all that information and figuring out what it's going to look like next. And that's where that order tolerant preference kicks in. And so once they get through that and they let go, their innovation phase is actually a little bit smaller because they've already decided kind of what they think it's going to look like at the end. So the next 4 slides are examples of what it looks like if you manage change well for people or if you manage it poorly for people. And so in this example, this is a fixer. And so fixers and independents both will have really wide swings in the innovation phase if you don't give them a couple things: parameters so they know what's in scope, and then also a project to work on or something exciting that they can do. Because if they get bored, they can cause a lot of turmoil and tension because they're just looking for something to fix or some new project or innovative way to think about something. So the orange line on the bottom shows you what it looks like actually if change is managed well for a fixer. It's much more condensed in time. The energy swings are not nearly as aggressive, and it's a lot smoother process. Independents look a lot the same as fixers because of that chaos tolerance and what they really prefer in their environment. And so those 2 look a lot the same. And then a stabilizer, stabilizers and organizers, if they don't get their questions answered, and sometimes you have to answer the questions for them instead of waiting for them to ask, because sometimes they won't ask. But if they don't have their questions answered, it takes them a long time to get over what was and feel comfortable what's coming up. So you can see that you can really, if you manage change well, you can really decrease the amount of decline that a person goes through if they're order tolerant. So the same is true for an organizer as is for a stabilizer. So those are the 4 different culture types seen through the lens of change, and how you can do a great job of managing change and how you can do not so great job, and what the difference really is between those 2 things. And we talk a lot about, we give all of our clients a lot of practical tools that they can go back to their workplace or communities and apply with those groups. We're not just all hand waving and fun and high fives. We like to give really practical application and tools that people can use to move off the dime when it comes to change. The next thing, of course, that we talk about with our clients are core values and accountability, and really creating a foundation for what that new normal is going to look like in the group, so that every day everybody feels like they're all coming to this place or coming together for a purpose, and that they all live under that, the umbrella of that same purpose. So we use a values crest to help folks with that. And then, of course, we have a communication toolkit that has all kinds of great tools and resources for teams to use to make sure that they're being productive and moving forward every day. And this is just an example of one of the resources that we use. The Experience Cube helps people really resolve conflict or debate things more effectively and get through the conflict or debate more quickly. So, as we always say, good change is healthy. Poorly managed change is a disaster. Don't be a disaster.
All right, and transitioning back over to me, this is Ben again. I want to talk a little about recruiting to wrap us up before we have any questions or anything else at the end today. We'll talk a little about recruiting and how that wraps into the conversation, right? So we've heard some interesting pieces from Ron. Again, like Meg, I love the science behind it. I'm a data nerd and a scientist at heart, so I love hearing the piece on edge versus core. And I love hearing from Meg as well, because she's super duper passionate about helping all of us get better at managing change and figuring out how to interact with each other. So as I was thinking about the conversation and how I want to start this out, one of the things I wanted to touch on really quickly before I dive into some of the slides is I was thinking through the edge versus the core and some of the experiences that I've had working as a recruiter in the past, right? And then some of the companies I've worked with since then. And I have done a little bit of all of those things, right? I've done some recruiting for places that have kind of a core that are more big cities, things like that. And that has its own unique challenges, right? We all like to think that the environment we're in is harder than what everybody else is facing, or the challenges that we're facing are harder than what everybody else is facing. In reality, they're usually just different. Not always the same, but they're just a different kind of issues and challenges, right? We think, well, if I'm rural, no one's going to want to come here. Well, that's true in some cases, but in other cases, people do want to be there because they don't want to be in a city. I will never, ever, ever live in a large city because that's not the kind of place that appeals to me and the family. So there's a little bit different challenges regardless of where you are. So let's talk about some of the recruiting things. Ron, go ahead and flip over for me. So one of the things I want to start off with is to help you get your head wrapped around this a little bit. If you've never recruited, or if you have never had to sit in that seat and bring talent into a community or to an organization, some of the things that wrap into this include the time that we spend trying to actually find people. I was working with a client a couple of years ago, and they were trying to find, of all things, cybersecurity engineers in DC. And it was such an eye-opening experience for me, because when I was recruiting, as little as 5 years ago, it was a different kind of experience. I was talking to candidates, I would tell them about the position, and then they'd apply if they wanted it. So in this instance, we're talking to these really in high demand candidates, really specific skill sets, and again, in a large city. And when I get in connection with one of the candidates, one of the most common things they would say was, oh, this sounds really great. Here's my list of demands, almost like a ransom note. I've got to work from home, or I've got to work, 20 hours a week as a contractor because I want to have another client, or, here's my rate. That's something outrageous. And so it struck me then, and it's stayed with me ever since, that today, more than ever before, is a real candidates market. Candidates have a lot of control. And if you watch actually the news and some of the stats coming out from the government, there are more jobs open than people that are unemployed right now. And that's been that way for a while, and it stayed, it's not changing anytime soon. It's been like that for months and months. So employers are really, really struggling with how to find the right people, how to bring them in. So when we look at that, Career Builder actually did a study a year or so ago on what this actually costs employers. When you're looking for people, you have a skills gap and you can't get them into the business, you can't get them into the community, what does that actually cost? And the average of that was about $800,000 a year. And again, that's an average. For a small company, it might be a fraction of that, but even 10% of that number is still a significant cost for those employers. And if you're a very large company, have a very large operation, it could be higher than that, right? And that comes not just in these recruiting costs, the actual cost of trying to get people in the door, but in terms of everybody else that's on the team. That's really painful in terms of morale when you're having to shoulder the workload because there's not enough people, or we're not able to serve enough customers because we don't have the people in the seats to actually do that service. So lots of challenges there. And Ron, if you'll flip over, we're going to look at actually some real numbers to give you an idea of what this looks like. So I went and grabbed a handful of stats to help you understand when someone leaves the business. Right, we talked on the last piece about recruiting costs, but there are a lot of things that wrap into replacing an employee. So if we have superstar employee Ron, and Ron leaves to go somewhere else, we not only have to do all the recruiting, all of those pieces of it, we also have to bring Ron on, we have to train him, we have to handle his benefits and everything else. There's a lot of cost wrapped up all in that. And so here on the left side, you'll see if this is a salaried employee, for example, they're making $40,000 a year, it could cost us up to $20,000 to replace them and get that new person up to speed, fully productive. We're getting, all the benefits for the dollars we're paying them in terms of wages. So that just goes to show you how expensive it can be to lose those people, right? And all these other examples here on the page. One is for a kind of a lower wage, right? If you have lower skilled roles, things like that. But on the far right there, let's say you have a really senior, experienced technical engineer or some kind of senior role that is hard to fill. There's not very many of them, or it takes a lot of training to get someone up to par on that. It can cost up to 4 times as much as what their salary is to replace them. So really, really challenging there. Just want you to kind of grasp the significance of that. And this is for a single role. If you're turning over 10 people, 100 people or more a year, it's going to be all over the place. It's going to be really, really expensive. So flip over, Ron, for me on the next one. This is one of the things we've used the word millennial here a couple times, and one of my lifelong missions is to pop this bubble a little bit. So I forgot this slide actually builds, so you'll have to click at least once. All right, so one more time. So the BLS data says that in 1983, the average worker tenure, how long people stay at a job on average, was 4.4 years in 1983. And if we listen to the news, we listen to the headlines, we get caught up in the hype, you'd imagine that today that tenure is probably half that, if that much, right? Someone staying at a job 18 months maybe. People just don't stick around very long. That's what we keep hearing over and over again. Well, a long time ago, people stayed in their jobs. The average tenure 5 years ago when they measured this was 4.0 years. So not that big of a difference, right? We like to think it's crazy. We like to think it's all over the place. But in reality, it's not that much different from what it was. If you'll hit that one more time, Ron, I'll show you why. The nugget of truth in this, we call them millennials, but millennials are like 40 years old now. So be careful using that word because they're not what you think they are. The nugget of truth there is that people that are early in their careers, they do change jobs more often than more established professionals. They always have, and they always will. Right? When you're just getting in your profession, you're not sure what you want to do, what you want to be, what sort of roles you want to have, what you like and don't like. And so you're shifting jobs a lot to try to figure out and narrow in on that thing that you actually want to do. And when we're recruiting, we're looking for people. We have to expect some of that if we're recruiting people that are in that early age demographic, that we can't keep them forever. There are some strategies for how to keep them for a longer period of time. There are some things that are wrapped into that for sure, but we can't expect them to stick around forever because it's just There's very, very few companies that are large enough to sustain that and have enough opportunity internally to continue growing people and moving them around and keeping them within the four walls of that company. It's a challenge for every firm, but that's one of the things that I love to push on a little bit when I get the chance. All right, next up. One more time. There we go. So this book that I love, it's called The 7 Hidden Reasons Employees Leave. And they actually went out there and did a lot of research on why people leave their employers. And what's interesting is they found that when you ask a manager, someone that's just lost an employee, about 9 out of 10 of them say, you know what, they left because of the money. We didn't have enough budget. We couldn't keep them. The competition was more competitive in their pay. Like they think it's about someone leaving because they want more in their paycheck. And there are times when that's true, right? If it's a commoditized job, that person will leave for an extra quarter an hour because they don't feel a connection to the company. But in reality, when they looked at the actual reasons people were leaving these companies, between 80 and 90% of those reasons were not actually about money at all. They were about things like someone's satisfaction with the work environment, things about the culture, the way we're treating people, the way we're talking to people, whether I'm appreciated by my boss or not. Ron, you'll flip over the next one. One of the things that actually that blows me away is, again, I worked in HR, worked in recruiting, and so it was my job to take care of the people. But there are stats out there that say 70% of someone's satisfaction on the job is dependent not on me, not on their pay, not on the culture, not even on the benefits and things we offer, but on that direct relationship with their manager. Their direct supervisor is responsible for 70% of their satisfaction on the job. The other 30% is everything else that employers can do to try to influence that, giving them good pay, again, giving them a culture that actually appreciates them and the value they bring to the business, making sure that we're recognizing them for their efforts, all those kinds of things. Even if we have the best culture and everything else, that only accounts for 30%. That's one's satisfaction on the job. All right, transitioning that a little bit, we did some research earlier this year to understand why people are leaving jobs, what things are worrying them, right? We keep hearing, again, the headlines about technology, artificial intelligence, all these things, robots. What does that mean for jobs? And in that study, we actually asked if people were worried about that. And 8 out of 10 companies that we surveyed in that study said that, yes, they expect the changing technologies, the shifting landscape of what technology can do compared to what it could do in the past. 8 out of 10 companies said they expect that to change the kind of skills that their people need to be successful in their jobs. Okay, keep that in mind. So 8 out of 10 companies say that matters. When we talk to the employees themselves, though, 7 out of 10 people have left the job because they didn't see any sort of career opportunity ahead of them. And it might have been there, but they didn't see it, right? The company didn't do a good job of explaining it, keeping it transparent, keeping it visible for them. And if I don't see a clear career path at my company, I will see a career path somewhere else when the competitor calls, that recruiter calls and tries to have a conversation with me, right? But the thing that got me isn't that those people left the job, because I would not fault them at all for leaving a job if they saw no opportunity ahead. But 95% of the people in that study, and it's hard to get 95% of people to agree on anything, even where to go for lunch, right? That's hard to do. But 95% of people in that study said, I would have stayed longer in the job if I had career growth and career mobility. And so the research that we've done in the last year has dug really deep into how companies can focus on talent mobility inside the business, looking for opportunities, how to communicate those, how to create, whether it's something as simple as a job rotation where they're getting other skills in the business, or it could be something a little more formal where they're getting other types of training, other types of advancement opportunities, but really connecting them into the business so they feel like there's a path ahead for me, there's a clear direction, I have a vision for what I can be at this company, versus only looking at, I sit down with my boss and have a conversation, he's only looking at, what have you done for me lately? Here's what you did last month. Here's what you did last year. And most of the conversations at most of the companies that we talk with happen like that. The windshield is bigger than the rearview mirror. We should be looking at the windshield, but instead we're only looking in the rearview mirror when we're advising employees, when we're coaching them, things like that. And so companies need to shift that a little bit. And that's one of, again, our missions is to help change that dynamic, change that conversation with how we approach our people. Whew. All right. Let's shift gears just a little bit. So I talked a lot about developing people internally, things like that. One of the things that I love is, again, data. I'm a data nerd, and LinkedIn does a really interesting study every year. Tens of thousands of people they interact with, and they look at millions of data points in their database of people that are in their ecosystem, and they ask people what were the most important things for them, what were the big deals. And so when you're thinking about recruiting someone into the business, it used to be about, hey, here's what we can offer you in terms of pay, and hopefully that's enough and you can come work for us. But again, I said this earlier, candidates have more power in today's market. It is very much a candidates market. If you don't have something more appealing than just here's a paycheck, it's going to be challenging to draw them in. So the three things that they came away with in their study, they were looking at this to understand what talent wants. One of them was salary transparency. And we're actually doing research on this right now. I finished working on the report this morning before the webinar. Candidates want to know what the pay ranges are, what the opportunities are for salary growth, things like that. They don't expect you, and I don't expect you, to open source everything, right? We don't have to be like some of the companies that are on the scary edge of things on transparency and posting like the CEO's pay on the website. That's not what I'm talking about. Managers need to be enabled to have conversations about pay, and your people want to know what the range looks like, what sort of opportunities can I get here. There's actually a lot of legislation happening in different states, and it's very much surprised me to see that Alabama is following suit, because we're traditionally very pro-employer, not as much pro-employee, but they just passed a law here, again, following Illinois and some other states, where we can no longer ask candidates what their salary history was on the job application. I cannot ask you, if you apply for a job with me, what your pay was at your last company, because the data shows that women are less likely to negotiate than men. And so if we know that you made less at the previous job, we'll offer you less money. And so they can't ask those things anymore. So salary transparency is a big piece of this. One of the others is workplace flexibility. And I completely agree and understand that every job isn't a candidate for flexibility. That just is the reality. We can't do, it's hard to serve someone at a fast food restaurant from your home office in your pajamas. But for those opportunities, those companies, those industries, those jobs where that is an opportunity, companies should be offering that, because candidates want that. They're looking for it. They're asking about it. And there are ways to do that and keep people accountable as well. And the last one, again, kind of tying into the previous conversation I had on development and growth, candidates are looking for places that are going to develop their soft skills, going to develop them as a person, so that they're not valuable just for the job that they're going to take with you, but they're valuable for their future career in whatever direction they want to take there. All right, closing in. And this is just a recap, right? I just told you this a minute ago. If we're only depending on a big, fat, juicy offer to get someone to come and work for us, you're going to struggle. You'll always struggle. Money might bring them in, but it doesn't keep them long term. I've always said that money might get them to say yes, but culture is going to keep them for the long haul. And in the companies I've worked with that did that right, the companies that we've worked with and researched and advised that did that the right way, that had the right culture, they're seeing better results. They're seeing the right kind of retention numbers and right kind of engagement numbers from their people that actually like being at work and want to be there. They're not having as much trouble trying to keep people as those that say it's all about the money. Let's send them a job offer. Who cares what the environment is? It doesn't matter as long as we offer them enough money. That's a short-sighted game, and it will always have you trying to play catch up.
All right. Thank you. I had to get myself off mute. A lot. And again, just to do a quick recap. So we've taken you through all the inevitable changes that are coming. Explained how the edge effect is bringing about diversity and opportunity, and how this really is a chance for communities and employers to reach out and grow, because we do have a lot of growth in front of us. Meg, of course, talked about, hey, we know this is coming. There's a gradual change coming. You can't stay in a permanent stage. Here's how we identify the different types of people and how they manage change, and how we can bridge those communications so that everybody can use their individual independent skills to get the whole community to move forward and change. And of course, as leaders, we have to do that. Ben wrapped it up with, okay, now that we know the change is coming, we have to have excellent talent and recruitment skills, and here's some strategies for that. So one of the things that we wanted to let everyone know, actually the three of us had come together earlier this year and collaborated in Florida at a conference, and which gave us the impetus to this idea that, hey, we could bring all three of these together, and communities have been asking for this with us. How could you put a whole workshop together? So we do have available in community workshops, if anybody would be interested, to help build out these strategies, to do the overall picture and understanding, and then build it into business attraction, change management, talent recruitment, and workforce technology. So want to throw that out there. I did have a couple questions that came in, and I want to make sure that we address any other ones. Ben, how many companies attract talent to their communities, but then they leave after a few years? Is there anything that you would share how to keep them?
So one of my good friends actually undertook a project at her last company around that actual issue, because they recruited from all over the place, all over the US. People would come here and work for 2 years, and then they would go back home, wherever they came from, to find another job. And so they started digging into it, and they found that there was nothing wrong with the company. There was nothing wrong with the jobs. They actually were really happy with the company, but they were being pulled back for family responsibilities and things like that. So what they started doing is they actually created a council focused on young professionals, and they started creating things like social events, right? Connecting them in with things around the community, going back to some of those edge strategies you pointed out earlier, right? They're looking for ways to connect them into the music and the other kind of pop culture stuff going on a local level. So they felt very connected to not just the job or their teammates around them, but the actual community itself. And that led to them increasing their retention for those roles. And some of them still left, right? Again, we can't control all of those things, but it drastically reduced the number of people that were leaving just because they didn't feel connected into that local area.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Another quick answer, a quick question that I was informed of is, are there specific digital marketing strategies and business development? Yes, we do that at Golden Shovel as well. We put those together. One quick example that I'll give you is we just finished up a community survey where we surveyed all the high school seniors and juniors to figure out how they're looking for their career paths, and are they most likely to come back? What are some of the cultural things that they would like to see if they were to come back? Obviously, it's not perfect because, as Ben mentioned, early in their career, they're going to go through lots of changes and career advancement questions. But that is a way to at least get some baseline to say, what are some positive things about the community that we need to focus on, and how do we attract? And then lastly, Meg had one for you. Does the Rose Group International provide practical tools for teams to understand change and how to move through it effectively?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. Yeah, we do actually. And that's, so Rachel and I, my business partner and I, came from very different backgrounds. She was an operational science officer for Landsat mission. And I spent a lot of my career in transportation and logistics. And then I was an HR manager for a gold mine, actually. And but what we found to be the case with all of our practical experiences is that people are still people, and you still need solutions to figure out how to get people moving forward really every day. And so everything that we've designed with our book that we wrote, IX Leadership, is a little bit of a kind of a recipe for how we interact with our clients. But everything that we do with our clients is somehow activity-based or driving teams and groups of people towards action and understanding accountability and transparency and how to really get the best out of your employees. And it's not just all theory. It's really something. Ben is definitely loves our stats and data. And so we're kind of the stats and data action items of the human capital world. Okay,
very good. Well, I got to tell you, it's been an honor to present with both you, Meg, and Ben. And thank you, Dennis McGarry, for bringing us all together at NTCA. Just a wealth of information I've learned from it as well. Any closing comments from either Meg or Ben? We're coming up on the hour mark. And as I said earlier, we'll be sending out follow-up emails with the recordings and some more materials to keep folks apprised of all the information. So Meg or Ben, any closing comments?
I guess what I would say is all of our clients, whether it's a community or a nonprofit organization or a for-profit organization, you always kind of are worried that you're on an island. So you're a little bit afraid to find resources because you're thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know if anybody's going to have a solution for this, or I'm going to sound like a crazy person. We deal in crazy all the time. We actually specialize in it, or what is crazy making. And so I would encourage everybody that whatever parts of this facilitation today, this webinar today, sounded interesting to you and you want to know more about it, reach out to us. We're happy to answer questions and help in the ways that we can. Because the only way we can really all build better communities together is if we work together. And that's what Ron and Ben and I are all very interested in.
Very good. And Ben, if you want to wrap us up and take us home, that'd be great.
All I would say is that this has been a lot of fun. Same as you said, Ron, I've learned a lot. I love hearing Meg and you speak as well, because you're both very passionate about what you're bringing to the table. And this has been so much fun for everybody else. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Got a little entertainment, got a little bit of information, and everybody's ready to get back to the workday.
Very good. And so I'll leave it with that and I'll close it up. And thanks everyone for attending, and really appreciate all the participation. So thanks again, Meg and Ben. What a great webinar and an honor.